I am Nina, and this is week 2 of your Design Your Sweater class. In this lesson, we're going to be calculating our cast-on number for the torso, casting on, and knitting the hems. I want to start by talking about hems very quickly. Stockinette stitch, which is the stitch that most of us are going to be using for our sweaters, unless you're venturing off on your own directions, which is totally awesome, naturally curls up, both at the sides and at the bottom. So unless you want the edges of your sweater to roll up, then you're going to have to use some sort of hem treatment. This means either use a stitch pattern that's a combination of knit and purl stitches, or do a turned hem, or leave it. You know, you might want the edges of your sweater to roll. A lot of people really like that look, and for a lot of sweaters, it's a totally appropriate one. Just something you want to ask yourself. I don't want you to lock yourself into a sweater that rolls up when that wasn't what you wanted. Some really popular and really easy hem treatments are garter stitch, where you knit one round and then purl one round, seed stitch, any sorts of ribbing, or the turned hem. You can try a few swatches of different treatments, or you might actually already know a stitch pattern that you like. Seed stitch I find is becoming really popular. Moss stitch is really popular. Ribbing is just always fabulous, and you can do a neat combination of stitch counts so that you don't have a plain old 2x2 or 1x1 ribbing. You can swatch them if you like, or choose the one that you like, and then you're going to be just about ready to cast on. I want to show you what I chose for my hem. This is a modified 3x3 rib. So I knit 3, and then instead of purling 3, it's a purl 1, knit 1, purl 1. So it makes this sort of striped rib, which I think is pretty interesting to look at, and it also means mostly knit stitches, which I'm a lot faster at than purl stitches, so I can get my hem out of the way really fast. I also want to use some 1x1 ribbing later in the piece, and I think that this will flow into it really nicely. Whatever you decide to use, though, you're going to have to identify the number of stitches in the repeat. This repeat has 6 stitches. That means that every 6 stitches, I start knitting the same repeat over. So I go knit 3, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, 6 stitches. And then I start over, knit 3, purl 1, knit 1, purl 1. If you're doing a 2x2 ribbing, then your repeat is 4 stitches. If you're doing garter stitch, then you don't have a repeat, which makes it really one of the easiest ways to do a hem. If you're doing seed stitch or 1x1 ribbing, then your repeat is 2 stitches. You just want to figure out what that is for your chosen pattern, because it will determine how many stitches you cast on. I wouldn't recommend going higher than an 8-stitch repeat, but depending on your yarn weight, you have a little bit of wiggle room with that. Lighter yarns, you can use a longer repeat because it takes less space and it's easier to round up to when you cast on. So the first thing, we're going to begin with the torso, the body of our sweater. And in order to do that, you're going to need to know your stitches per inch, which you calculated in the last lesson, and A, the number A from your schematic, which you also saw in the last lesson. The schematic was taken with your sweater lying flat, so for the letter A, you're going to want to double that, so multiply it by 2, and that will give you the circumference in inches of the hem of your sweater, and then multiply that by your number of stitches per inch and see what that gets you. I have down here what I did. My stitches per inch turned out to be 4.75, and my A number was 34. So if I multiply 34 by 4.75, I get 161.5. That's, for your purposes, the number that you'll write there. Now, there's a little bit of a problem here, because 161.5 is not a whole number, and I can't cast on a fractional number of stitches, so I'm going to have to round this up or down. Second of all, I want to make sure that my cast on number can be divided by the number of stitches in the repeat. So since I know that I have 6 stitches in my repeat, I want to take this number, 161.5, and round it up or down to a number that evenly divides by 6. Does that make sense? So I chose the number 162. I only have to round up by half a stitch, and 162 divided by 6 is 27, which is a whole number, so I'm doing fine. If you're seriously math challenged, feel free to ask questions in the comments and we can help you through this part if it's becoming too much of a headache. You do want to test this number carefully though, because you want your repeat to work all the way around the round. You want it to be even, I think for aesthetic purposes and also for reasons of your own sanity. There's a place for you to fill this in on the worksheet as well. If you want a sweater that pulls in at the bottom, that keeps you extra warm, then you'll want to go down a needle size from the one that you identified to use for the body. If you don't care, then you can use the same needle size and nothing bad will happen. It'll just mean that your sweater's a little straighter in the body. That's what I did. I don't really need a tighter hem or tighter cuffs for the sweater that I'm making. I would like this to be something that I can wear to work or can wear out, but I don't need to go skiing or snowshoeing in it. So I'm not too concerned about trapping the warm air in around all of my extremities. But if you are, then you can certainly do that. Conversely, if you want your sweater to flare out a little bit at the hem or to flare out a little bit at the cuffs, then you can go up a needle size and knit this part a little bit bigger. But as soon as you've decided on your needle size, then you're ready to cast on. So take your working yarn, cast on the number of stitches that we just calculated, and get going. Start knitting your chosen pattern stitch. If you are doing a turned hem, then you're just going to cast on and start working in stockinette. Later on in the process, we'll talk about how to pick up and work the inner hem facing when the sweater is done. You're going to want to work in this chosen stitch pattern, or if you're doing a turned hem in stockinette, for a few inches. I know that that's a little bit vague, but you probably want to refer to your sample sweater or the garment design that's in your head or that you've drawn out a little bit on paper for this. I knew that I wanted some very deep ribbing, so I went for 4 inches. Most commercial sweaters I see are between 2 and 3 inches to the ribbing. If you want a lot less or a lot more, then you should go ahead with it. And when we're done with this section, we'll switch to stockinette and we'll discuss waist shaping and bust shaping, which we're going to cover in the next lesson. I'm Nina, and I'm excited to keep working on my sweater with you.